All right, guys, welcome to the next installment of this interview series. And joining us today, we have a man who has worked with Leinster Rugby, Dublin GAA, Coola, to name but a few. He is currently the ladies' ones and men ones S&C in Pembroke. He's working with the under-19 Irish girls, and he is the director of fitness at Fuse Training. Sami Dowling, welcome.
Thank you very much, Si. Appreciate you bringing me on board in this podcast series.
No bother. Glad to have you. I think it was a no-brainer to get you in here with all your experience. I think it hopefully make for a very interesting conversation. So, Sami, we'll start at the beginning, as we have with everybody, I suppose. First time, probably not talking about hockey, but how did you get your start in S&C, and how did that come about?
Good question. I had like a passion for wanting to be involved in sports from a very young age. I think as a teenager playing sports, I had that dream that most of us do of wanting to be a professional athlete. So playing rugby, my initial dream was to become a professional rugby player, but quickly realized that wasn't going to happen. And I remember, I think I was 15 or 16 at the time, and I was watching a Lions DVD of the Australian series back in 2001. And I saw the title strength and conditioning coach, and there was a guy called Steve Black, and I found out there was this actual profession of being a fitness coach that you got paid to do and you were involved with the team. So kind of thought, oh, that would be the next best thing. If I couldn't be an actual professional athlete, the next best thing would be to be a coach who works with them. So kind of did a little bit more research into that and proposed that idea to my career guidance counselor in school, who thought I was batshit crazy, to be fair, and I don't blame her because at the time, there was only 4 professional teams in the country. So to go to your career guidance counselor and tell her you want to be someone who works in one of those 4 teams was probably quite unrealistic. But I pursued it anyway. I kind of wormed my way into internships with Leinster when I was in college and the IRFU, and became that kind of gopher person that every time they looked around or they needed a help, I was there. And over the course of about 2 years, by doing internships during my kind of different college breaks and holidays, I was fortunate enough to interview for a role and get a role, starting off initially with the sub academy in Leinster, and then progressed up to the academy. Spent just like literally just under about 10 years there, just over 9 years I was there. And throughout that journey, was fortunate to kind of get exposure at national level with different teams as well. So work with the under 18s schools team, under 19s team, national ladies team as well. And through, I suppose, contacts there, got a foot in the door and started working with Dublin GAA and spent 4 years there as well. And yeah, it was kind of it was just like this really enjoyable journey whereby I just was, I suppose, never shy of wanting to put up my hand and help when someone said, oh, can you help us out with a program, or can you work with this team, or whatever it was. I was always wanting to be involved. Probably lost track of an awful lot of time spending with friends and family during those years, but didn't bother me because I just wanted to learn. And I suppose I was like a sponge. I wanted to absorb as much as I possibly could and try and progress.
That's interesting. Like to put the sort of timeline on it, like that is a long time slogging away in there in what is not an easy environment to be in. What was, like you said, you missed out on family time, friends time, and stuff like that. What was it really like in there? Like the nitty gritty. Like, I suppose, what am I trying to ask here? I suppose like people now that it is a thing that people can kind of aspire to, there's more people around there. S&C has grown. People know that it's now a profession that can be pursued while still being quite niche, particularly in Ireland. Obviously around the world it's not so much, but like what are some of the maybe pitfalls? Let's start with maybe pitfalls that people need to look out for going into it, but also like the highs and the peaks that come with it too.
Good question. Probably pitfalls. and now probably the same as back when I got into it. Like I got my foot in the door back in 2007. So that's when I got my first contract with the IRFU. And part of that contract meant I'd go a station in Leinster, which is now like 2007, how long ago? Oh God, my maths are terrible. 14 years ago. Yeah. So 14 years ago, right? There weren't as many, I suppose, coaches wanting to be S&C coaches. There weren't as many, I would say there was probably more opportunities and less coaches. Now you've got more courses, you've got more students, and you've potentially less opportunities at professional level, or you've the same, maybe a better way of phrasing is you've the same opportunities, more coaches. But that's a professional level. What I think is really cool is that at amateur level, the opportunities have increased and have expanded. So potentially one of the pitfalls is that some students go into courses expecting that the desirable or the ultimate is working with a professional team, and anything short of that is a failure, which is not the case at all. So yeah, maybe one of the pitfalls is people are too close-minded going in. So I would always kind of try and, anyone who asks for advice, for what it's worth, I say be as open-minded as you can be when you want to work in strength and conditioning. Think of yourself as a performance coach, not just as a strength and conditioning coach, and become the best generalist you can be, rather than thinking that my niche is X. I'll give you an example. Like I probably loved the speed and strength and the power game, and became a specialist in that area when I first started working in it. Naturally, because that is what I enjoy training, and that was a strength of mine as an athlete. Conditioning was not a strength of mine. I hated it, and as a result of it, I didn't really have a keen interest in studying it. Yeah, exactly right. So, which a tip I would give to any coaches now is become a really good generalist, get to know all aspects of the fitness game. And you have a better chance of being employable if you're a really good generalist, if you can actually, if you can cover a lot of areas. If you enter that world of wanting to just become a specialist, and you enter it very, very soon, particularly when the world goes through a pandemic and budgets are cut, they'll tend to look for coaches who can cover more bases. So that would be one of the pitfalls that I suppose fell into quite early on, and I think could still be a pitfall. And I try and advise students when, or anyone, it doesn't have to be a young student, a lot of people can enter this game later on in life as well, which I think is really cool. But is that if they're thinking of doing a course or they're wanting to gain experience, like try gain as broad of an experience as you can and enter the most general course. I suppose it's a good thing that there's strength and conditioning degrees. I don't know where time will go, but perhaps they may not be as prevalent in years to come, and maybe the degree that will be sought after will be like a general sports studies degree, or like, again, back to that sports science degree, which gives you a lot of the general, covers a lot of the bases, which gives you a taster, and then you might specialize in strength conditioning either in your final year or as a postgraduate course. Because I think it's really tough for those who have specialized in strength conditioning for 4 years in a degree course who can't get a job, and then have to pivot. I think credit due to those that pivot, but some see it as a failure, and it's not at all. It's just part of the industry. Yeah. So I suppose that would maybe be the pitfalls. And in terms of the highs, like, I don't know where to start. There's so many. Like, the highs are immense. I mean, you for me, it's like you get paid to do something you love to do. You don't actually see it as work. You're surrounded by athletes who are in the same situation. Like, they're getting paid to do what they love to do. It's ultra competitive, so you see the best of the best. You just see this level of competition, and the stakes just rise. You see kids come in and you see them become men. That's probably one of the most enjoyable part of the jobs at academy level, is you see, teenagers come in, and after 3 years, they're these fully fledged, fully grown, like professional adult rugby players. And it's really enjoyable that you helped, just a tiny part of that journey. It's incredibly rewarding when you see players, transition from that academy level, getting their first senior debut, and then progressing on to national level, and some who've even gone on to play at Lions. It's incredibly rewarding to see that, you remember when they were only 15, 16, 17, 18 years of age. So I think that's probably, for me, that was some of the big highs.
You've been there, seeing them at that like key stage in their development where you're actually teaching them how to lift and move and laying the foundations for all the work that they'll do on and off the pitch for the rest of their career. Are there any, you were there for 10 years, and that started 2007. So when did you start seeing that sort of follow through with the players that you've been working on, seeing them transition into the Irish team? And if you got any good examples, obviously I'm sure people would love to hear that.
I think you don't see it at the time, you don't recognize it. I remember in my first meeting with Liam Hennessy, who was the director of fitness at the time, and he said to us, you're ultimately going to be responsible for the players that are going to be playing for the Irish national team in 2015 and 2019 World Cup. So the players you're training now, that's what you're developing them towards. It was a big national ID program that was, I suppose, ran provincially. And you don't reckon, I was 21 at the time, and to be honest with you, like at the time, initially I was like, okay, and programs that we were developing with those players, I kept wanting to see, like, I spent some time in my internship seeing what was happening in the senior team, and I want to know the programs they're doing, and how can I fast track this player? That's just not how it works. So it probably did take me a little bit of time recognizing that what is important for 16-year-old Tyg Furlong is what's important for him now is what I have to focus on, not what's important for him in 2015, 2019.
Did you teach him those 60 feet from the game against?
No, definitely. I can't claim credit for that. I think he had that. If you ever saw footage of him playing hurling when he was a teenager, you'll have seen how good his footwork was back then. Like, he was incredible. I remember him on an Irish 18 youth trip against England. I think he was only 15 or 16. He played for the Irish 18 side 2 years in a row, and even his first year where he was a youngster, he was fearless, absolutely fearless. And you could very much recognize that a player like that, who had like that bit between the teeth, had the potential to go places. And that's what you recognize early on. You couldn't see, because I was at the start of my career working with players, in their late teens. It probably took five years to see those players transition into senior players, and then seeing them transition into national players. It's only now that, I see players break through, and friends of mine are going, where did that person come from? Like, that person's come out of nowhere. And I'm going, he hasn't come out of nowhere. Like, he's been in the system for the last 5 or 6 years. They don't just spring out of nowhere. And the school systems now have advanced to the point where players are coming into academies so well developed. Some of them spend maybe only even a year there. You've got like phenomenal S&C coaches in schools, like David Jones is one of them in St. Andrews. Just look at the players he's been responsible for, being like having shaped part of that physical pathway. Guys like Andrew Porter and Jordan Larmour didn't like spend minimal time in the academy. Not just, obviously they were very skillful, but they were so well physically developed. I mean, the academy was initially developed to give players physical development time. The 3-year range was given because that's what players needed. When you see players only spend a year there, the person that deserves a lot of credit is the S&C coach that worked with them at school level, which is great because that person has had 6 years potentially to work with them, which is phenomenal. And credit where credit due, the RFU and Leinster have invested in that, recognizing that the wider base we develop there from a physical development pathway point of view, the better the reward. So I think, I know it's kind of a long-winded answer I gave you, but perhaps it took 5 years for me to recognize that these players that, are progressing and they're excelling. Unfortunately, not all of them do. So it was hard to see, those that didn't make it in Leinster. But it's a random figure I'm talking about. Hopefully, I'm not too far off. I'd like to think 90% of the players that were in our system have ended up playing pro rugby, because if they didn't make it in Leinster, if the appetite was there, they went on and played pro rugby in one of the other 3 provinces, and some even over in the UK or France. And it is cool to see now when you watch a Connacht team, a Munster team, or an Ulster team play, players there that I recognise that I had coached at some stage of their journey, and I'm just delighted to see that they've continued playing and chasing their dream.
I think it wasn't a long-winded answer at all, and I think you answered the question that I was trying to answer, or trying to ask, better than I even asked it. So I appreciate that. So a segue that I probably didn't intend to make just yet, but we will move on to the hockey now. So with your role in the under 19s, are you starting to sort of develop that sort of academy idea there in working with the underage players in Ireland? Because from my perspective, we've had very, very good hockey players for a long time, but possibly we need to be developing better athletes. And because S&C, I suppose, with hockey is still kind of in its infancy, very much, but like it's virtually non-existent in the club scene, but growing. Would you see yourself as starting to try to develop that in the Irish setup? Is that already there, or what are your thoughts? You might disagree with me totally on this.
No, actually, I do agree with you. Hopefully, I'm like a very small part of it, because to be fair, Adam Granger, since he stepped in as high performance director, has been a big driver of that, and he's recognised a lot of the points you've just touched on there. So, I first started. So the current team now, they're under 19s. I would have started when they were under 16s. That was my first year with them. So it's about 4, at the end of the season, it'll be 4 years working with maybe with like 70% of that squad that all started off at under 16s, and that was definitely the goal. I was asked to help out with the under 16 team, and kind of year one, it was a little bit of, okay, let's see what can we do, what can we have access to, trying to get content to players, trying to, I suppose, monitor them when they come into camp, which then in year 2, and to be fair, actually halfway through the first year, we then were able to get access in UCD and coach them, which was probably like one of the biggest things we wanted to do, was actually, given a program is great, but if you can actually improve their movement quality and coach them, then we can develop athletes, we can develop athletic qualities. And I think that's definitely, like, I think Irish hockey I don't think it's too dissimilar to Irish rugby. We're working with a limited pool of players compared to our competitors. So we really have to nurture them. And I think you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we punch well above our weight in most sports in Ireland. And I think that's a credit to the systems and the coaches and the players and the dedication and the support network that is ever improving. So from a physical development point of view, it improved from year 1 to year 2, where we were able to get at certain stages of the season access to them twice per week. Very much in terms of Leinster-based players, so Leinster-based players and Ulster-based players. There's still some inroads to be made in Munster, and I know Connacht as well. And I know Hockey Ireland are doing their best to improve that. And I can only imagine it's no mean feat, because they're probably trying to break down a lot of barriers. And I think S&C and hockey, at least when I entered the world of hockey, which I'm not involved in it that long, I'm only involved in it, I think, about 4 or 5 years. It was very, I suppose, best way of putting it is, S&C was very much part of the women's game, but it didn't recognize it to be as big a part of the men's game. And I genuinely hope I don't offend anyone in the men's game here, but culturally it just wasn't respected. It was like, do I really have to do that program? Like, are you for real? Where from the women's side of things, I think they just saw such improvements. And I remember at the time, when I was working in Leinster, talking to George Petrakis an awful lot, and he was working with the national team, and he brought them to, you know, a solid level from a conditioning, strength and power point of view. And I know Darren took it to another level, and for me it was quite easy, thanks to Darren and formerly George. You know, the under 16 girls players, and when they became under 18 to 19s players, very much knew how important their strength and conditioning program was culturally. Like, it was accepted that this is a big part of your potential selection criteria. Um, I did not have to put any effort into getting a player to understand how important it was to adhere to the program. That genuinely was made easy for me based on what was happening at the senior team and at senior level. So credit to those guys for doing that. And I think it has very much fed into the club game. And I think in the last couple of years, we've now seen it, particularly in the last 2 years, we've seen the same transition amongst men's hockey. Like, the guys now very much understand, and I'm not involved at national level with any of the teams, but I very much, like at Pembroke, I've seen over the last few years the improvement and the adherence, and also the interest from the players as well. Like, it's been really enjoyable during pre-season from year one to year two, discussing with you guys like the why behind the content. And yeah, you know, we'll get the odd bit of like, do I really have to do this? But you know, that's just general banter. But there's a genuine interest of wanting to be better. You know, Paddy and Dev are like big believers in getting players to understand the why. And they've, like, I think the key to physical development is very much buy-in from management. And like, those two guys and Colin as well are just like, have been fantastic on the men's side of understanding, you know, like, this is something that we believe in, apart from that we need, but we believe in. Like, that makes an S&C coach's job a dream. Like, and I'm like, genuinely, I have worked with different club teams in different sports where I've moved away after, say, a season because the management team just don't buy into it at all. They understand it's a piece of the puzzle, which is all it, like, genuinely is. It's a piece of it's. There's many pieces to obviously trying to get a team to be successful, and physical development is only one small piece, but ultimately, this is just my experience, so it's only my opinion. But to get ultimate buy-in, if the head coach and the management don't buy in, you're not going to get the team to buy in. And for me, in Pembroke, I came in first through working with the lady first through Gav, and he's such a big believer of that, and it just drives through that culture. And Paddy and Dev and Colin are the same, so I think it's improving in hockey, and I think we'll see that across the board in the league over the next number of years. I'd be very surprised if you'll have a team, you know, that get into the top four that are unconditioned. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, the days of the pub team is gone. That you're just going there by sheer, like.
Yeah, and I think that to add on to that, like the more competitive that is at club level, and I think if the culture improves across the board, across the league, that's just going to, I suppose, that'll cultivate, and that'll just foster through to national level. Like, it's going to always be a challenge at school level to do it. I think with hockey's different than rugby when we look at the school game. I think like club hockey, from a competition point of view, that's where players want to be at. You don't have schools players in rugby playing club rugby, or at least men's or women's, like, first team rugby, until after school. So I think the club game, there's a huge advantage there, because it's such a community based. It's so community based that if you have players coming up from underage all the way up through to the senior team, understanding that this is what it requires to be an ultimate performer, to play on any of the teams, not just the first, that you'll enjoy the game so much better, you'll play for longer. It just, everyone benefits from it.
Yeah, the benefits, really, once you see them, that's key. Like, the example I think of is just seeing, like, first year of you working with the ladies ones, and you get the grumblers and stuff, and then you start to get people realizing, oh, this actually works. And then all of a sudden it's just away. It's like, cool, what's next? And then even I think your demeanor as well helps a lot, and it helps a lot with the buy-in, because you're not a drill sergeant or anything. It comes from a place of support and love and will to see them succeed. And I think that's so key in how it comes across, because people will do that extra rep for you. They will run that thing. You'll still get a few grumblers, but I think very much the more you see the benefits of it, the quieter those voices get.
Yeah.
Part. There's one or two people you just can't help, and I think we all know.
Yeah, and yeah, and exactly, and they're always going to be there with every team. By the way, at every level, you'll get them at like elite level rugby as well. Don't worry, that's just part of it. But like, I'm glad you say, because it's nice to hear that. I suppose I'm not too like for me, like the approach I take now, or I like to take, or I hope I take, is this is what we want to achieve. This is how we can do it. This is the why behind it. And I'll always say, if someone says, I don't want to do this, and like, I'll never force anyone to do anything. I don't want to be a drill sergeant. I used to be one. Like my early years, I was one. And I went, like, when I became aware of it, I was actually so embarrassed, because it's not what I wanted to be. I hate the thought of being that. Like, don't get me wrong, every now and again, you've got to be a little bit tougher, but the ultimate way to achieve something is if it's in a calm way, in an educational way, and players understand it. That's fantastic, because the great thing when you're working with players, in Pembroke, like, they're all adults, and even some of the youngsters that come into the team, like, they're really smart kids. They understand they're there because they want to be there to improve. Everyone's there because they genuinely want to be there. No one's forced to be there. So when someone's given up their time to be there, and they're scheduling those 2 sessions a week, I want to try and make it as fun as possible, and never want someone to feel like we're doing this just to tick a box, just because everyone else is doing it. It's genuinely, we're doing this so you can become a better performer, and yeah, hopefully that's how it's taken up anyway.
I think so. And then that's, as you said, like, you need the buy-in from the management, and that's probably where the buy-in becomes so important, because it's not, you can kind of go, okay, cool, if you don't want to do that, that's fine, but you're going to have a conversation with the coach, and if there's going to be a tight call, well, that stuff is probably going to stand to you or stand against you. And there's your stick. If you're offering the carrot, well, there's your stick, even if you don't have to administer it yourself. But no, there's great stuff. What do you kind of want to see if we ever get back on a bloody pitch? Well, I'm hopeful we will, but what do you kind of see or want to have happen next now? We can speak a little bit about, maybe stick with Pembroke first, and then we can possibly expand into sort of your role with Irish hockey, and what do you kind of want to see and cultivate in there?
Yeah, good question. So the hardest challenge for everyone is probably the break that we've had between when we last were able to train, and for players to be able to play, because I think we had something really good going training wise. So I think probably for players, like, to be able to get back and just train and have fun, that's probably like the immediate goal, is for players to be able to get back onto the pitch with stick and ball. If that be just even summer hockey, and people just getting back to genuinely enjoying the game, because it's been so long since they've played it. Get rid of any rustiness without feeling, or like a worry of a fitness test hanging over them, or a certain amount of content that's going to be thrown at them. I think just being able to get back to a point where everyone's having fun playing the game is really important. And then from there, just, I suppose, getting an understanding of when there'll be a level of competition, because I just work really well knowing when the competition is, knowing how much time we have to prep for it, and then kind of just work backwards from there with management. But if we could get back to a point where we could get the men's and ladies ones into, I suppose, into that space where we were prepping, having fun, and getting ready for competition, that would be sweet. And then there was some really good work, I think, in the last year, where in the last 2 seasons, where so the content that was happening, with the ladies and men's ones was really being fed down to all the other teams. Working with other coaches in the club, whether formally or informally, whether it's a Zoom chat, presentation, or just hanging around after training for an extra 20-30 minutes, just talking about how they can implement some warm-up strategies, or if they're picking my brain on warm-up strategies, or looking at conditioning content and when to ramp up conditioning, when to peel back. We were planning to do stuff at underage level in the club, so looking to take advantage of during midterm breaks when kids are off, bringing in some conditioning elements to some hockey skill camps. So not making them conditioning specific, but very much showing how we can simply just add in elements of physical development into their hockey training sessions, because I think we're really fortunate in Pembroke, because we've got so many kids playing, and if you've access to them over the years, if you just slowly add layers to that foundation, you just build this solid pyramid of performance. We know it's hockey in Ireland, from what I've seen so far, is very similar to how GAA clubs operate. Like, very rarely do players leave. They feel part of the community. They've joined for a reason, and they have an ambition to want to play, for the ones, and to play provincially and nationally. And I think, a club like Pembroke, who's got phenomenal contacts, and where coaches want to build a platform and share that level of knowledge. It's the last year when that was, I suppose, brought to the forefront for me. I kind of really enjoyed doing that. So if we can get back to that next season as well, spend some time, I suppose, developing a little bit of structure there. In it, it'll take 5-10 years before we'll see the rewards of that. But that I've enjoyed being part of that with Leinster. It was the same. I did the same with Dublin GAA, and Irish hockey is doing the same, and I'm a very small part of it with the 19s team. But at club level, if that can be done, it'll assist the national program immensely.
Absolutely. It's a little bit like you said, of the sort of like the Andrews coach, the S&C coaches in school. If you've got that, well, that's always going to benefit, and it'll help when guys get into those systems. It will help them to take off and very much run with it once they're in there. I love what is happening with that information filtering down to the lower teams, because having coached there, having played there, like, sometimes the coaches down there, with all due respect, and I've been one of them myself, there are some who are interested in coaching but don't necessarily have the knowledge or the skills that they need for all of the aspects. They're good hockey players or whatever, but fitness might still be what they were taught when they were kids, or whatever it might be. And usually it ends up being mindless running, and a lot of it, and you're risking injury, and two, it's no fun at all. And particularly the lower teams, that's kind of the whole shtick. A little goes a long way. You need to be a little bit fitter, because if you can be a little bit fitter than all the teams around you, you're probably going to do pretty well at that level. A little really does go a long way. So I think that really will filter down and help throughout the whole club and its success, because that knowledge, like it'll help people enjoy it that little bit more. There's a little bit more purpose, a little bit more science behind the fitness that they're doing. It will help immensely with everybody's enjoyment, and that just adds to the club environment. Really interesting perspective as a sort of new person to hockey, seeing that comparison to GAA, I suppose, in that you're kind of almost in it for life. It's like hockey for life. You're in, and you really
because I thought it was cool to see, because at club level in rugby that doesn't quite happen, and perhaps it's because for a chunk of their kind of teenage years, if they're playing schools rugby, they're not really that involved with club rugby, and then when they finish schools rugby, some of them then, if they do go back to playing, they might go back to the club they were playing with. They might go play college rugby, but because there's quite a gap there between when they were playing perhaps at under 13, under 14, there is a chance that they don't go to the club they previously played with. Where at least with hockey, where they're playing club hockey and school hockey at the same time, that link stays, they stay connected. They actually, I stand to be corrected, I think kids play more club hockey than they do school hockey throughout the year. So they stay connected through that community, and it's, you know, I look, like in most sports, there are reasons why players may leave, and that's totally fine. But I've just noticed there's less of that happening in hockey compared to that happening in rugby. So when I recognized that, I thought that was quite powerful, because you have an opportunity as a club to really influence the development, both from a technical point of view for players, but also as from a physical development point of view. And I think it's a great strength that Pembroke will have going forward, because you then become a club that you become a club that players from other clubs go, I want in. Yeah. I want part of that, you know, where you get parents go, I'm going to send my kid there. You know, like me as a parent, that's something that I would want for my kids, or I would look to. Like if I see this like community-based, interactive, forward-thinking, physical development passing on, that's where Jacob with the twins are going. You know what I mean? Like I don't have to teach them anything. They'll go there, and I know they're in good hands. You know, and they'll enjoy it, and they'll go through the age groups with players all the way through. So I think that's kind of cool, because I recognize that, you know, that's a big reason why players stay. You know, or if they go play college for a few years, that's a reason why they come back. So I think
the ones who are outside that are probably the exception that proves the rule. It really is that community, and it's all the way throughout. You got kids. We talked about it a few times. Like you got kids who were, I don't know, they might have been the high heights of A's hockey in school, but they're still playing. There might be twos or threes or whatever.
Yeah,
still playing. They're still involved. They're still sticking with the club, and there is that sense of home. And even having traveled abroad, it's the same around the world. For whatever reason with hockey, it is just a community wherever you go, and it opens a load of doors, and it is makes traveling very easy as well, because you jump straight into the same kind of thing everywhere else.
Yeah.
One thing I was going to ask you, because so GAA isn't really in my wheelhouse, which is maybe why I didn't jump on it when you mentioned it, or when we mentioned the intro, but you worked with Dublin GAA, and from Irish sport perspective, probably arguably one of the most successful franchises in the country in all sports. Were you there at the beginning of that stuff? Were you there before then, when they were laying the groundwork, or when did your time with Dublin GAA come in?
So, good question. I started my first year with them was during the 2009 season. So was with them as like an assistant S&C coach from 2009 into 2010. The head S&C coach became the lead S&C coach in Leinster, and then handed the reins to me, which was deadly, but also petrifying at the same time, because I was thinking to myself, God, I'm very, I'm sure I know there are other S&C coaches who would have more experience, who possibly would feel like they are the right candidate for that. But I'm incredibly grateful for Pat Gilroy, who was the manager, and Mickey Whelan, who was his trainer, for giving me that opportunity to transition from, you know, assistant S&C coach to the head S&C coach with Dublin. And like in my first year, it was like just a gym guy, you know, that's all I was doing. But I had an interest in wanting to become more involved in pitch side, or in the conditioning and the speed element of their pitch sessions. So again, they asked me to, I suppose, become more involved. They were open to that. They recognized there was an opportunity there, and they hadn't tried it before, so why not do it? So we very much shaped that from 2010 to 2011, and introduced, I suppose, some of the concepts that we were doing at academy level in Leinster into Dublin. And Pat was a big believer of recognizing what worked well in Leinster, and trying to see could we shape that with Dublin. And you know, it was fantastic then for them to win the All Ireland 2011, and to be part of that management team. And again, credit to Pat and the county board, because they recognised that how can we improve this even further. and it would be to do something similar to what Leinster does, which is have an academy system. So Dublin had a 21 side and a minor side, which is kind of like their under 18 side. And you would have S&C coaches that work at that level, but no one's really connecting, or there wasn't a filtering in system to develop towards a pathway of what you want a senior player to be. So he gave me that opportunity to put that structure in place and oversee the 21s and 18s program, the minor program, have coaches work in that with those teams, and for me to oversee it. So as players were coming through, that they understood what was required, both from a training load aspect, how they could perform the basic exercises. Because when I first started with Dublin, you had a broad mix of players that were there, 5, 6, 7 years, who had training experience in the gym. We also had players who were learning to lift for the first time, and we're talking about adults here. So you can imagine the range of physical development and robustness, like in terms of durability quality that you would have. And you've young players, old players, and then some players that you have to try and manage because they've been playing for quite a while. So yeah, I was with them from 2009 all the way through to then 2012. So we won the All-Ireland in 2011, got to the semi-final 2012, and we're narrowly beaten by Mayo that year. Pat stepped down. Jim Gavin came in. Jim brought a whole new management team and accelerated it to another level. So Pat was very much part of the start of that process and was incredible in he was like, I really enjoyed working with Pat and the management team that he created. I didn't work with Jim, but I know from what Jim did and from what anyone I've talked to that's worked here, I can only speak highly of it, and it's brought it to a level. And Desi Farrell seems to be doing the exact same now. And Desi was the minors coach back when I was working with the seniors. So it was great to see that Desi was always had a keen interest in what he was doing at minor level, not to just excel the minors to win the All-Ireland, but to prep those players for 21s and seniors. And when Desi was minors, Jim was 21s head coach, and he became the successor. So like Dublin, I can only imagine, invested heavily in developing a pathway and shaping that, similar to what Leinster did. So it was actually one of the highs I forgot to mention earlier was actually working with coaches and managers at all those different teams, and through those teams having seen different managers, I suppose, come and go. The different styles of management and leadership that they bring has been probably one of the biggest highs, actually. So it's fun to be part of that and to be exposed to it and to learn from it.
Yeah, for sure. Is it because as you said at the start, a little bit like everybody else, that have aspirations to play sport to the highest level or whatever, and part of what that comes with is the ability to get to work with coaches. And it's nice that in a roundabout way you've still gotten that experience of working with those people, because they, while they do obviously affect how you figure out how to play on the pitch, they're also some of your mentors, and they help you sort of develop as a human along the way as well. So it's in a roundabout way you've almost gotten the best of that experience through that S&C route to be able to get there, which is kind of cool. Because I look back at that and look at some of the coaches I've gotten to work with, and that's one of the things that I've always taken away and try to take back, is like the things I've learned from the different coaches that have come along, even if it's not necessarily even hockey, just coaching styles and how they interact with people, the good and the bad, obviously.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that's gone that way.
Yeah, one of the most admirable parts of working with the Dublin senior football team was, and I just like recently worked with Wexford as well. Like these players don't get paid, and they're training full time, and like we pretty much created a full-time program when I was in Dublin, and I'm quite confident it's as close to that, if not even more, in terms of the detail that they have to work on. It's incredible. We're talking about morning gym sessions and evening pitch sessions on the same day, with players who are either going to college in between or work. Some who have families, have kids. It's incredible. Like I have such like huge respect for them, and because it doesn't always pay off. Like I saw the win in 2011. It was incredible to see the highs followed by the low of 2012, where you get to a semi-final and you lose, and there's nothing at the end of it.
We're gonna show it. That's it. It's like, oh well, that's over.
There's only one team that wins, you know, out of the 32 counties that compete. It's such a harsh reality at the end of the day. But I think what's incredible about it is the love and passion that everyone has for the game, and it's like it was incredible to be part of that, like to witness the dedication. Literally only today I drove past a player, because I was doing a security check on one of the Fuse clubs out in Artane, and at traffic light, car right opposite me was the player Dean Kelly. I literally haven't seen him since 2012, and it was so cool. Both of us like rolled down the window. It was like, Dean, how are you? He's like, Sammy, how are you? Like, and not either of us almost amazed that we remember each other's names, because we haven't seen each other in 9 years. I remember his name because I remember the dedication he put into training. Hopefully he remembers my name, because I wasn't too much of a drill sergeant. But you know, it's nice knowing that you can see someone 9 years later, even if you only work with them for, you know, a few years, and it's cool to like briefly for 10 seconds say hi before the light was green and we had to drive again.
It shows you had some sort of impact in that person's career, life, to some way that they still remember you, because the people that don't really are usually the ones that you cross the other side of the street and kind of see me, I'm not sure who that person is, I'm just gonna kind of walk over here, you know. Do you think that attitude, because they are like the competitive and the commitment and everything, you have to do that in that amateur sport? Do you think that's being taken advantage of a little bit? Do you think it, like, is there, by the powers that be? I don't think it is by coaches. Obviously, it's the system that they're in. That's just how it is. Do you think that's taken advantage of a little bit? And because surely there's calls for, if they're practically professional, for them to go professional, considering how much money seems to be in the sport in Ireland.
Oh yes, it's a good question. Do I think they're taken advantage of? I don't think they're taken advantage of because they sign up for it. I don't mean that in a harsh way. Like, they don't even. I don't think they realize. I don't think some of them realize how big of a commitment it is. I don't think they even think about choosing it. Like, they're such a big part of it. They love it. I suppose, having been involved in it, I would love to see players get rewarded for it in some way, shape, or form, or to be I'd look at, it'll never be a fair level playing field, and it would be boring if it was. You know, let's face facts here. But at the same time, I do think there are some counties there who get a harder deal. And the commitment levels are no less there, but perhaps they don't get the support that they need. And it's not that it should be taken away from the likes of Dublin or some of the other top sides, but you would like to see you would like to see it become somewhat more of a level playing field, just in terms of support they get. And the GPA are great, don't get me wrong, but I suppose there's a restructure of how the season is going to be run. COVID gave them that almost clean break of, okay, we now have an opportunity to change things, and it was actually quite cool. Some of the powers to be in the GPA contacted coaches, players, S&C coaches, and asked them for their opinion. You know, if they were involved with a couple of teams, like, what do you think would be worthwhile changing if we had an opportunity to do so? And the season structure is one that they've changed so that there is less chance of players, I suppose, not getting a break, because there's situations where a player essentially is playing nonstop for several years. They are, particularly if they're younger, they're going from playing, you know, college ball, playing club football at underage level if they're good enough, so at under 21 level, senior club football, playing at county level, possibly at underage and at senior age. And that's just talking about playing one code. If they're a dual player and all of a sudden they're playing hurling as well, some of the training schedules you would have to manage and try and educate, particularly amongst teams who aren't as competitive. Didn't have as much of actually a challenge with that with Dublin. But with Wexford, it was immensely challenging, and I from what I've heard, it's the same with other counties in in divisions, possibly 2 and below, who just don't have those resources where players, for the love of the game, want to be involved in every team they can be.
Yeah.
So if there was an opportunity to try and I know the season's kind of reshuffle is doing that, but a way of protecting players and making them feel like they they don't have to say no because they're not asked to play with certain teams. It shouldn't be a you know they shouldn't their character shouldn't be judged, which sometimes it is if they were to say no, I can't play or train.
Yes. Some conversations with you, a couple of guys in my course, like I don't have much to do with GAA, but hearing some of their stories and the amount that they're playing, like I was scratching my head at times. You're like,
Yeah, like
how?
it's crazy. Like last year, last season working with Wexford was fantastic because Paul Galvin was the manager, and he had nothing but like an interest in the well-being of the players.
Hmm.
And it was actually, I think, for some of them, a shock to them at the start because he actually cared about their workload. He actually, one of the best things I think he brought to that team was he cared about the player and their life outside of football. Which is a shock to him. It's so important when you think about it, like managers like, no, I actually care about all the stress. Like you are coming here to compete for your county because you love and we want to improve and we want to perform, but the stress involved with what we do training wise. But if you are exposed to so many other forms of stress outside here, he genuinely wanted to help how they dealt with that, and he wanted to know. Like players would just not tell you that they have played with their college that day or they played with their club, and they would travel up and you'd only know because they're covered in muck and you're like, dude, did you not like shower over the last 2 days or what's the story?
Yeah.
And they're like, no, I played a game earlier today, or I trained earlier today. I've just come from a training session. And we need to know that, particularly if we've planned a very tough training session, if the load that we're planning is really high, there's nothing wrong with telling us that you've come from a training session. We're not going to tell you necessarily not to come, but we would like to modify and alter that. And he cared about that so much because I think for him, he recognized that when he bought into looking after his body, it extended his career. And I think, and I stand to be the corrected with this, but um, he's one of those players who genuinely wishes he bought into it sooner, or the resources and the education was there earlier, because he possibly would have played on for longer. And he genuinely cared about that for them. And I think it was a shock to a lot of them at the start because they were previously expected to train, expected to turn up, irrespective of what's going on outside of county training. So I really enjoyed, working with a team who are at Division 4 level. We're trying to change that. Like the management is trying to change that mindset, and again create that culture of, from a performance and a development point of view, this is incredibly important.
Yeah, culture is probably the big thing there. And like as an outsider who has nothing to do with it, what I see from GAA is it's still kind of a little bit of that old school macho culture of like get on the pitch there and hide your feelings and run and do as I'm told. And that's, as an outsider, that's kind of what I've seen from it. Now, obviously, that is just my interactions with it, I suppose. But it is great to hear that that is starting to change with coaches like that, because as the science says it, like history says it, that's the way you get the best out of your players. A bit of empathy along the way, it goes a long way. And if that culture
Yeah.
can change, God, like it's a hard one with GAA. We actually had this conversation the other day. We were talking about how Ireland kind of gets compared to smaller nations like New Zealand when it comes to sport and stuff. And oh, why aren't we doing any better? But none of those countries have GAA pulling the resources. Not resources. By resource, I suppose I mean players. Like it's
Yeah.
such a big sport here, and around the country, a lot of our best athletes are probably in there playing an amateur sport that's only played in one country. So we were saying it's an unfair comparison to compare, like, oh, we should be like New Zealand because we got a similar population. Like rugby is their gas, so that's why they're there. We don't have that. We arguably, if you look at some of the mutants in GAA, like some of the most ridiculous athletes Ireland has ever produced, play
Yeah.
the sports like your rugby, hockey, and soccer. I'm sure we would probably be more competitive, even more competitive than we are, if we were able to tap into some of the athletic resources that we have on the country that are playing GAA. What are your
Yeah,
thoughts on that? Like it's
yeah, like it's a good one. Like it's an interesting one. Like so, in terms of GAA, like I have seen an interesting shift over the last say 3-4 years, where at club level, working with Kula, bit of work last year with Bray Emmett as well, where the coaches that are going in now, so the managers that are going in are um, were players that have been part of systems. So Paul Curran took over as manager with Kula 2 years ago, and he would have won an All Ireland with Dublin in 1995, I think. Ger Brennan, who's taken over at Bray Emmett, and he won the All Ireland with Dublin in 2011. So those players are bringing this more modern aspect to coaching and player welfare and player well-being to it. And I think we'll see more of that happening now. You know, hopefully that again filters in and you then have a little bit more of a fair playing field. But I think you do see a lot of players play. I've seen them, and you're kind of thinking, God, if that person played rugby or hockey, like they'd be unbelievable. But that's just like it's an opinion, and you don't know if they would be as good. You're looking at physical attributes. You're looking at, I suppose, attributes of their character. It's an interesting one. You just don't know, and if they had opportunities to play, it would be great, and hopefully that's what we'll see happening more going into the future. We'll see kids playing more sports, not feeling like they have to, and that sometimes comes from an underage coach being so competitive, not letting their kids play other sports, or saying you will not get picked unless you just play this sport or you turn up to all our training sessions. I would love it, there to be, a time when a kid could turn up once a week, or even if he's only coming once every second week, as long as we understand why that is. And if they're trying and they're getting an opportunity and they get selected, they should. But I'd hate for at underage, which is developmental stage, right, that a kid doesn't get selected because they're not training every week. Yeah. Like if there's a legitimate reason as to why, there's an understanding, and that kid is possibly playing multiple sports and involved in, music and gymnastics, God knows what else, that's should get an opportunity to play if there's like general rotation. I believe from what I hear at underage level in New Zealand, kids are picked and everyone in the squad gets rotated. So you play a game, you get a full game or even half a game every second week, irrespective of how good or bad you are. And coaches are retained, or they're essentially, their review is based on player retention. So how many kids sign back up the following year. So naturally, a kid's going to sign back up if they're getting game time, irrespective of whether that team is winning or not. I'd be the same if I was a kid and I was terrible at a sport, but I'm getting game time and the environment makes me feel like I'm improvement and I belong there, right? Because it's all comes down to belonging. If you're a kid playing sports and you feel comfortable in that environment, you'll turn up as often as you can. If you feel like, I'm not getting my game because I'm not good enough, and I hear the coach give out when I drop a ball or this, that kid's not going to sign back up the next year. They either will, best case scenario, hopefully they go to another team so they keep playing. Worst case scenario, they give up. So I think coaching is improving. Coaching courses are improving from what I've seen, which I think is great, because like you said, like a lot of coaches initially are doing what they think is best based on their previous experience. Mm-hmm. Some of it may and some of it may not, but if there's an opportunity for them to improve and learn so that the kids feel like they belong, then we're at a win-win. And I suppose where I'm trying to get with this, and it's quite a long answer I'm giving you, right? I'd love to be more of a collaborative approach, or a community. Again, I like to use the word community approach to sport as a whole. So like I grew up in Holland, and in Holland, when you're a member of a sports club, it's more than one sport. So like the sports club that I was a part of played football, hockey, baseball, and I think there was tennis there as well. So, you kind of rotated through the season between the different sports. which was really cool. And it was great because facilities were shared. You know, there's like one big club bar for the members of the like it wasn't like they were members of the tennis club. Everyone's a member of this club, and some play tennis more often than others. Some play baseball more often than others, or softball, or football, or hockey. And you know, here it's very much like there's a hockey club, there's a rugby club, there is soccer and football clubs, and then you've got GAA clubs. And GAA are probably the closest thing as to what I've just explained there, where you'll have Gaelic football, hurling, camogie, women's football, all operating from the same facility. And if we ever got to a point, it nearly happened a couple of years ago, Coola and Blackrock Rugby Club nearly formed, and we're going to share facilities and training facilities and have one club bar. And when I heard that, I was like, oh, this is savage. Like, if this happens, like this is going to be the, you know, the hub of almost sporting development for the future. Yeah. And I think if that happens, then you'll have an opportunity to see some of these freaks that we've talked about, that we've seen play Gaelic football, go, oh, like if they got exposed to hockey and rugby, and they're going, oh, like there's an opportunity to play in the Olympics in this sport, or get a professional contract. Because you'll see in Gaelic football where there are players who go off to play Aussie rules, and some support, and it's perhaps frowned upon in other worlds. And it's like, why can't kids do that? You know, I think if the opportunity is there to do it, like, give it to them.
Absolutely. The research is there. It shows like multi-sport kids are usually the best athletes. I mean, unless they're just shit at sport, and God love them. For the most part, like the research backs it up. And maybe it's a community between this, a harmony between the sports, as opposed to, it's probably very much every man for themselves at the moment, with bar a few exceptions. Obviously, within GAA, you get that community because they can play the different sports within that, but it's still one island.
Yeah,
so there isn't that spill over into the other sports. But yeah, because you see the odd one come through every now and then. It might be someone on a hockey pitch who pulls out some hurling skills, and you're like, oh, unbelievable. There you go. That's
yeah.
The guys under the high ball in rugby, it's like, well, they've clearly played GAA at an underage level. And God, we'd love to see it. You almost wonder what you could do like what GB did for the 2012 thing, where they just like literally set up a whole load of tests and were like, doesn't matter what sport you're from, come and have a look. And you're like, oh, he'd be a great rower, but he plays tennis. Doesn't matter. Let's put him on a rower, see if we can get him a gold medal. And that kind of talent identification process, I guess, maybe something that comes up in future years. If they ever really want to get serious about building up the medal count, it might take something like that to do it.
Yeah.
We'll shift the focus a little bit of self-promotion, I guess. Tell us a little bit about your work with Fuse.
Yeah, so I started with Fuse back in October in an exciting position as director of fitness. Fuse is a fitness club. They currently got 5 locations. So the first location was in Bray, and they expanded to Finglas, Artane, Smithfield, and Waterford. And yeah, I've got a really cool role where I work with all the gym instructors and personal trainers to, I suppose, again, like, foster that community and really get everyone singing off the same hymn sheet and feel like we're one team, albeit operating in 5 different locations. And I really want to help accelerate their ability to become the best coach they can be, because if they become the best coach they can be, they will be able to transfer their knowledge and be able to impact the members of the clubs. So it's a really exciting role. I absolutely love it because I really enjoy working with coaches. So it's like a slight transition out of coaching players or coaching even the general public to coaching coaches. And there's a second part to that which will start up soon, which is we'll have our own academy where we will actually educate and certify anyone that wants to become a personal trainer. So and give them not just a simple 12-week program, off you go and now go into the trenches and learn your trade. You'll literally be brought through the whole process. You'll be in the clubs, you'll be in the trenches with us, to actually learn the ropes. So excited about both those parts. One, training up new trainers, and working with the trainers that we have in our clubs to I suppose to create like one big like strong team that is able to give the I suppose the results and the knowledge and the kind of the culture and the lifestyle that members want, because we're not interested in giving a member a 6-week body transformation program. We want them to understand, how their bodies work, how they can achieve long-lasting results, which starts by identifying where their current habits are, and just once we know where they are, we will start improving them and take it from there.
Class. That's a really interesting concept because, like, don't get me wrong, did a very good course in elite in Black Rock, and it gets you a certificate at the end of the day, and it stuff was taught well and everything. But the one thing that it's always going to lack, and you see it with coaches who then come through those systems, is that real world experience of coaching Mary from down the road or whoever it might be. And
Yeah.
really interesting concept to actually have them integrated into the process.
Yeah, like we've even started with even giving internships to coaches that are currently, say, in college, that want that in the trenches experience, and we're giving them paid internships. Like, we don't want to just say, look, for those that have like gained their qualification, we don't want to feel like everything has to be at their expense. So I've been there, I've done that. I don't think it's always fair. I think sometimes like coaches are taken advantage of in that setting, and we'll continue that on. So we're even going to look to launch a program where we will pay for some coaches to do the course, and we'll give them employment opportunities. So we'll have an opportunity to I suppose, select the best that apply themselves, and give them jobs, because we want to make it very accessible, both for we want to make fitness accessible to the general public. And that's one of our biggest aims, and it's our mission. It's to fast track, I suppose, Ireland's transition to becoming a fitter, healthier, and stronger nation, because we're miles behind. We're so far behind, it's not even scary. And one of the reasons we believe that is because the accessibility aspect, the cost of it. We want to make it more affordable, and I think the government has a big part to play in this as well. I think they need to help fitness clubs, gyms. They need to help them out so that they can make membership more affordable. So that's one of our missions, and the other one is to make it more accessible for those who have a keen interest in wanting to be part of that industry, so that they can help. So yeah, we're really passionate about that, and enjoying the challenges that we're faced with by obviously COVID, and being restricted with not being able to, I suppose, physically train people. But as a club, we're still providing access to training to our members via Zoom, and it's actually been savage working with the coaches on a daily basis through Microsoft Teams. So we're getting because we're based in 5 different clubs, the coaches know each other inside out now. They actually genuinely feel like they're one club, which is fantastic. And somewhat COVID gave us that opportunity. So there's been pros to that as well. And then we're doing a few revamps in the clubs. We're changing a few layouts. We're trying to I suppose really go in the direction that we feel fitness is going, and yeah, the owners have been incredibly supportive in allowing us to do that. So yes, it's been exciting.
Yeah, it sounds pretty interesting what you're trying to do there. And fully, I think the government really showed their hands, coming back to your point there, that they need to kind of put up or shut up at this point, because they've shown their hands. All of our shutting down for health and safety reasons, but a lot of things that are very unhealthy still are allowed to continue, but fitness isn't. And it's sort of showed their hand, and they're still maybe in that backwards mindset that sure, the gym is just a luxury that you go and you lift weights and whatever, but it's really not. The amount of money we could be saving on if we didn't have so many obese people, and all of the health implications of being unfit and everything that goes with it.
Yeah.
There'd be an investment at this end would save them a lot of money at the other end.
No, exactly. I couldn't agree more with you.
Hopefully we'll see some change. maybe this has brought the point home. Well, hopefully it has, and we get to see some change in the future. Tell the folks where they can find you. You on Instagram, website, etc.
Yeah, good. Yeah, so good. I am on Instagram. I'm not very active. So you'll find me. I think it's Sami underscore Dowling. Yeah, you'll find me there. If anyone has any questions, just send me a message. You'll see me on the website as well, fusetraining.ie, so you can contact me through there. But yeah, Instagram's probably the best place to get me. I'm on Twitter. I don't even know what my name is. I'm not. I literally use it more for research purposes more than anything else. But yeah, best place to get me is on Instagram.
That's all good. And Fuse's Instagram is at Fuse Training.
That's it. Yeah.
Awesome. Final question for you. Hopefully we'll at least see the return to outdoor sport and stuff. Any advice for those getting back into it? I know most, probably the ones at the top, the athletes at the top will have been taking care of themselves. Some down the lower teams maybe haven't. Any advice for those sort of starting to get back into it, and as we ramp up into hopefully into a preseason and a new season? Any tips and advice?
Good question. Yeah, so firstly, take a real gradual approach, like a real slow burner approach to going back to training and competition. Even being mindful of, like, if your sport involves wearing footwear that you normally wouldn't wear. So like in hockey, for example, like the shoes you would wear, if you haven't worn them for close to a year for some people, make sure that you just get used to wearing them over the course of a couple of days at home before stepping back out onto the pitch. And even if you have an opportunity before going back to playing, even if it's summer hockey, if you have been completely inactive, just even getting out and get, building up your aerobic fitness qualities, starting off with some walks and building it into some jogs. And if you can do some general body weight home activities, just getting your muscles used to, having to run, having to stop, having to change direction. Because the longer you're inactive for, the greater the risk of chances are of getting injured. And hopefully when you go back to playing, it'll be in a very fun capacity first, where it's just about the enjoyment aspect and building up the amount of sessions you do gradually, and very much keeping that fun aspect there.
Yeah, absolutely great advice there for me. Sami, thanks so much for your time. You've been a champ.
Sorry, thank you.
No bother. Folks, if you've enjoyed this interview, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and check out our previous installments in the series. And we hope to see you again soon with the next edition of Clubhouse Conversations. Cheers, guys. Sami, thank you very much. That was class.